Continuing my preseason prediction grind, today it's going to be Washington at Michigan. Here we go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day. Don't forget, guys, Golden Blue Dude does have a sponsor. It's called Tri-State Wood Sketch, and you can find them on the internet at www.tristatewoodssketch.com. He does amazing work. He can do any shape or size. All you have to do is send him the picture that you want on there. And if you mention that Golden Blue Dude sent you, he'll take 20% off. Pretty much every sports YouTube channel you can think of is doing preseason predictions right now. So I decided to do it just a little bit different so I can stand out just a little bit. So I'm taking pretty good non-conference games, predicting the game, and predicting the seasons for each team in that game. Today, it's going to be Washington at Michigan. This is going to be a good game. I think both of these teams might have a decent season. First, let's talk about Washington. Last year, they finished 3-1, first in the Pac-12 North, but they didn't get to go to the Pac-12 championship because they had COVID issues. New head coach Jimmy Lake had a very successful first season, and he looks to build on that in year two. Last year, they averaged 30.2 points per game. That's 49th in the nation, and 402.8 yards per game. So the offense was so-so. It has a lot of room for improvement. The great news for Washington is all 5 of their offensive linemen are back, and this is the biggest offensive line in Washington Huskies history. The quarterback competition is tight, but I do expect the starter to be quarterback Dylan Morris. Last year, he was 67 for 110. That's 60.9%, 897 yards, 4 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. He's a slight dual threat quarterback. 17 carries, 57 yards, 3.4 yards a carry, and 2 touchdowns. Washington will have a very reliable run game. That's what they want to do. They want to run the ball. Running back Kamari Pleasant, 34 carries for 144 yards, 4.2 yards a carry, and running back Sean McGrew. This guy is good. 43 carries for 277 yards, 5.3 yards a carry, and 4 touchdowns. And don't forget about running back Cameron Davis, 15 carries for 67 yards, 4.5 yards a carry. I also think Washington has a great stable of wide receivers. Wide receiver Rome Odunze, 6 receptions for 72 yards. Wide receiver Jalen McMillan, 1 reception for 16 yards. Wide receiver Terrell Bynum, 8 receptions for 130 yards. They got the Texas Tech transfer wide receiver Jalen Pope, 28 receptions for 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver Sawyer Racanelli, he's 6'2", 210 pounds, and looks to have an impact immediately. They also got a transfer from Michigan. Wide receiver Giles Jackson, 15 receptions for 167 yards. They have decent depth at the tight end position, but they are inexperienced. Tight end Jack Westover, 1 reception for 9 yards. And freshman tight end Mark Redmond, he's 6'6", 245 pounds. These are more of blocking tight ends than catching tight ends. Now let's look at their defense. They have 8 starters coming back on the defense. That's pretty good. The problem is they did lose 2 starting cornerbacks. Last year they allowed 25 points per game. That's 49th, and allowed 346.3 yards a game. I think the front 7 is where the strength of this defense will come from. Starting with defensive lineman Tuligace-Noah. He had 5 tackles, 4 by himself. Defensive lineman Sam Tamaney, 10 tackles, 4 by himself. Defensive lineman Jacob Bands, 3 tackles, 1 by himself. Linebacker Ryan Bowman, 6 tackles, 5 by himself, 1 sack. Linebacker Edifon Ulofacio, 47 tackles, 31 by himself, 1 sack, 4 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. Linebacker Jackson Searin, 27 tackles, 17 by himself. And linebacker Savell Small, 7 tackles, 5 by himself. They have playmakers and excellent depth on that front 7. The problem Washington had last year was their pass defense. Their secondary was not very good. Might be the weak link of the defense this year as well. Here's a look at the cornerback battle. Cornerback Trent McDuffie, 14 tackles, 9 by himself, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble. Cornerback Kyler Gordon, 18 tackles, 12 by himself, 1 pass deflection, and 1 forced fumble. And then you have the incoming freshman, cornerback Elijah Jackson, 6'1", 185 pounds. And then cornerback Michelle Powell, 6'1", 205 pounds. We also have the Oklahoma transfer, defensive back Brendan Bradley Hiles. Last year he had 30 tackles, 20 by himself, 1 sack, 1 interception, and 1 pass deflection. So that was a big get for this Washington secondary. Here are the safeties. Safety Dominic Hampton, he had 1 solo tackle. Safety Asa Turner, 17 tackles, 9 by himself, 1 interception, and 1 pass deflection. The Huskies do have talent in their secondary, but the inexperience could potentially hold this defense back. Let's look at the Huskies 2021 football schedule. They start off with a home game against Montana, win. Then the road trip to Michigan, I'll predict that later. They get Arkansas State at home, win. Cal at home, win. At Oregon State, win. Then they get their bye week. Then they get a home game against UCLA. I think that's a hard-fought win for Washington. At Arizona, win. At Stanford. I think this is where Washington loses their first Pac-12 game. They get Oregon at home. Washington will have tremendous home field advantage. Oregon will have a pretty good team, but I think Washington gets the win in this game. After that, they get Arizona State at home. I actually think that's a loss. Arizona State is going to be a really good team in 2021. After that, a road trip to Colorado. Buffalo's not going to be any good. That's a win. Then they get Washington State at home. That's a win. So depending on that Michigan game, I have Washington going either 10-2 or 9-3. Either way, winning the Pac-12 North over Oregon. Now let's talk about Michigan. Where can I start? Oh yeah, Jim Harbaugh. Restructured contract, a lot of incentives to win. The good news for Michigan's offense is 4 of their offensive line starters are back. And believe it or not, they allowed the fewest plays for a loss in the Big Ten. That one surprised me. And that offensive line does have excellent depth. The big question is at quarterback. The starter at quarterback should be Cade McNamara. Last year, he was 43 for 71. That's 60.6%, 425 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interception. But don't forget about the Texas Tech transfer, Alan Bowman. The problem with him is injuries. If he can avoid injuries, this kid could actually be really good. Last year, he was 150 for 232, 64.7%, threw for 1,602 yards, 10 touchdowns, but 7 interceptions. You got to cut back on that. I think Michigan will have a pretty good running game. They have decent depth. It starts with running back Hassan Haskins, 61 carries for 375 yards, 6.1 yards a carry, and 6 touchdowns. And right behind him is running back Blake Corum, 26 carries for 77 yards, 3 yards a carry, and 2 touchdowns. Believe it or not, Michigan has talented and a deep wide receiver core. Wide receiver Ronnie Bell, last year 26 receptions for 401 yards, 1 touchdown. Wide receiver Cornelius Johnson, 16 receptions for 254 yards, 3 touchdowns. Wide receiver Mike Sandersteele, 7 receptions, 82 yards, 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver A.J. Henning, 6 receptions for 59 yards. Wide receiver Roman Wilson, 9 receptions for 122 yards, 1 touchdown. And then the talented incoming freshman, the 4-star wide receiver Christian Dixon at 6'2", 187 pounds. He'll probably have an immediate impact this year. The Wolverines are okay in the tight end position. Nothing to brag about. Tight end Eric All, last year 12 receptions for 82 yards. And tight end Luke Schoonmaker, 2 receptions for 54 yards and 1 touchdown. Whoever wins the quarterback battle will have a lot of targets to throw to. I think this offense will be much better than it was last year. Now let's talk about the defense. The defense is actually shifting to a 3-4 defense. I mean, is there any way the defensive line could be any worse than last year? It was very bad. Michigan had the 3rd worst defense in the Big Ten last year. Here's a look at the defensive line. Defensive end Aiden Hutchinson, 13 tackles, 9 by himself, 1 pass deflection. Defensive tackle Christopher Hinton, 13 tackles, 9 by himself, 1 sack, 2 pass deflections. Defensive lineman Donovan Jeter, 11 tackles, 5 by himself, 1 pass deflection, 1 forced fumble for a touchdown. Incoming freshman 4-star Braden McGregor, 6'6", 260 pounds. They say he's a beast. Defensive lineman Julius Wellscoff, 6 tackles, 3 by himself, and a half a sack. Defensive lineman Mazee Smith, 3 tackles, 1 by himself. Defensive end Taylor Upshaw, 16 tackles, 8 by himself, and 1 sack. That defensive line has got to generate more pressure than what it did last year. Bottom line, I think Michigan will be fine at linebacker position, and I think they'll actually be better this year. Starting with linebacker Josh Ross, 53 tackles, 28 by himself, 1 sack, 1 interception. Linebacker Michael Barrett, 43 tackles, 25 by himself, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. Linebacker David Ojabo, 1 solo tackle. Now let's talk about the secondary. Let's be honest, last year Michigan's secondary was complete trash. The talent is there. It's can they step up? They have to this year. Let's start with the cornerbacks. Cornerback Gimmon Green, 22 tackles, 18 by himself, 8 pass deflections. Cornerback Vincent Gray, 25 tackles, 16 by himself, and 3 pass deflections. Here's a look at the big-time battles at the safety positions. Safety Brad Hawkins, 40 tackles, 26 by himself, 2 pass deflections. Safety Makari Page, 6 tackles, 3 by himself. Safety Daxton Hill, 45 tackles, 29 by himself, 1 interception, and 3 pass deflections. Safety DJ Turner, an incoming 3 3-star, 6 foot, 165-pound freshman that might be a threat to be a starting safety. We'll see. And also, incoming 4-star defensive back Andre Seldon, 5 foot 8, 154 pounds. He's undersized, but he is a playmaker. So hopefully competition will raise the level of this secondary. Let's take a look at Michigan's 2021 football schedule. First game, a home game against Western Michigan, win. Then a home game against Washington. I'll predict that here in just a second. A home game against Northern Illinois, win. A home game against Rutgers, win. A road trip to Wisconsin. That's a tough road trip. I think that's a loss. At Nebraska, I think that's a win. They get their bye week. Northwestern at home. I think that's a win for Michigan. I think Northwestern is not going to be anywhere as good as what they were last year. At Michigan State, that's a tricky road game, but I'm going to give the win to Michigan because Michigan State is in the crapper right now. After that, a home game against Indiana. Indiana's going to be talented. I think that's a loss for Michigan. At Penn State, that's a loss as well. I have Penn State having a big bounce back year this year. At Maryland, that's a win. And then to finish off the season, a home game against Ohio State. I think that's a loss, but I don't think it should be penciled in as an automatic win for the Buckeyes this year. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than what it usually is. So depending on that Washington prediction, I have Michigan going either 8-4 or 7-5. Now for the actual Washington at Michigan game prediction. I think this is actually an underrated game. It's not being talked about enough. This is going to be very tight, very good. Both of these teams, I think, take a step forward in 2021. I actually have Washington winning the Pac-12 North again, and Michigan in the upper echelon of the Big Ten. Last year, they finished 6th. This year, I think they could finish as high as 3rd. But in this particular game, I think Washington is just a little bit better. I know it's on the road, but right now, Michigan don't have that much of a home field advantage. It's been a while since Michigan has had a juggernaut of a team. So I'm not worried about this being a road trip for Washington. That defense is talented. They're strong in the secondary, so they'll be able to neutralize the Michigan passing attack. And then Washington's running game will be able to grind clock, move the chains, and shorten this game. I have Washington winning this game in a close one, 28-24. So overall, I have Washington winning the Pac-12 North, going 10-2, getting to the Pac-12 championship, and probably playing either Arizona State or USC. So that means for Michigan, I have them going 7-5, but getting to a halfway decent bowl. Will it be enough for Jim Harbaugh to keep his head up high and keep his job? We'll see. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.